At this point, I'd like to introduce Dan Klinedinst. Dan's a vulnerability researcher at CMU in the CERT Coordination Center. Dan's going to kick us off here with our first talk today, so thanks, Dan.
So while my slides are coming up, I just wanted to say it's great to be standing up here again. I see a lot of familiar faces out there. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dan Klinedinst. I helped start B-Sides Pittsburgh back in 2011 with Joe and some other people. And I don't know about Joe, but I don't think that we thought at that point that at some point there would be a 6th annual B-Sides Pittsburgh with almost 300 people. So that's pretty awesome. The current organizers are doing a great job. And so can we get one more round of applause for all the organizers? And Brian, I'm still waiting for my slides up there. Hey, all right. All right, so my talk is called I've Heard My Robot Overlords, Infosec Challenges as Emerging Technologies. This will probably be one of the less technical talks today, but probably be good to kind of get everybody started for the day. I'm going to keep walking away from this microphone, I apologize. So this is based on a report that we did at CERT and put out a couple months ago called the Emerging Technology Domains Risk Survey. And it's by myself and several other people, 2 people that I work with at CERT currently and one who used to work there. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge their work, which is probably more than my own. Copyright information. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this, but I'm a vulnerability researcher at the CERT Coordination Center, which is the subset of the CERT division at Carnegie Mellon University. We're basically the group that has been putting out the vulnerability notes for the last 30 years. So when you get those in your email, that's from us. Like I said, I helped start B-Sides Pittsburgh, and I used to work at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and a bunch of other things. So our agenda today, we're going to cover 3 main topics. We're going to talk about common challenges in emerging technologies and industries. So these are things that cut across a lot of different industries as we see it. We're going to then go into some specific technologies we reviewed in this report and talk about specific risks and novel risks that I thought were interesting. And then I'm going to do kind of a case study and talk about connected and autonomous cars because that's where most of my research has been done recently. I'm going to see if I can hold this. Hopefully I won't like feedback. All right, so the Emerging Technologies Risk Survey is something that we were asked to do by Homeland Security a couple of years ago, and they basically asked us to look at things that were coming down the pike that we might have to be worried about in the future, we as a country and as the InfoSec industry. And so we went out and tried to identify technologies that were going to be hitting like really in the market in the next 5 to 10 years. We didn't want to go too far out. So we identified these. We've been updating it each year since then. And really what we did is we identified common and widespread challenges that were new to the security industry that are going to be coming up. And then we also identified some technology-specific risks. And then what we did with that is we decided to recommend either that we do technical research in it. So my car research is a result of this. And basically we identified automobiles as one of the highest impact things to society. So that's why we decided we should focus our research on that area. Or if we should just do some outreach. So like the medical industry, we just don't have the people to do everything. So the medical industry, we're not really doing hands-on technical research, we're just doing outreach. Or just keep situationally aware of what's going on in those industries because they might not be quite to market saturation yet. Our technologies we chose are based on the Gartner Hype Cycle, which comes out each year. Most of the things I'm going to be talking about today kind of fall to the right-hand side of that peak. There's a few from the left, but the things to the right of the peak are generally things that are starting to really become widespread in the market. The things to the left are still a little bit farther out there. All right, so some of the common things we've seen across these emerging domains. One is the fact that you can have kinetic effects. You can make things happen in the real world. So I'm sure everybody in here has probably seen the Jeep video and know that Chris and Charlie were able to take control of the Jeep and drive it down over the embankment as well as control it on the road and things like that. And there's a whole bunch of industries where this is going to be a concern, that you can now not only hack into a computer and access the information or steal the information or change it or take the computer down, now you can actually access things and cause things to happen in the real world, which obviously has safety implications as well. This didn't cause anybody to get hurt, but you can easily imagine that hacks on cars, on medical devices, et cetera, can certainly cause human harm or even death. So here's another commonality that I like to call semantic attacks. There was a situation recently where Microsoft decided to put up this artificial intelligence chatbot on Twitter, and within 24 hours, the AI had read other Twitter feeds and what comments were made to it and stuff, and it had started spewing all kinds of pro-Hitler, racist, completely inappropriate things, and Microsoft had to pull it off of Twitter. So this was an attack, certainly, by people that were trying to get the AI to do something that Microsoft had not intended, but it wasn't an attack in the sense of trying to exploit a buffer overflow or a network protocol vulnerability or anything like that. It was sending it valid information, but causing the machine learning behind it to do the wrong thing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get to the cars. So business models are also different, and that actually does concern us. And the reason why I use this specific little graph from an income statement here is the biggest difference I see between traditional software vulnerabilities and these emerging domains where computing and networking is built into products is that there are now physical products, and your business model has to account for that. So software has really large margins because once you've created a copy of software, you can resell it, unlimited number of times for virtually no additional unit costs. Hardware or physical goods are not like that. So if you are making home routers or something, it costs money to produce each one of those. And so that's going to change your economics, change how much you can expect to spend to support those over the lifetime of the device. And patching for security problems becomes more of an issue because now you can't just push software patches over the air necessarily. You might have to go out and find these devices in warehouses or store shelves or somebody's house where they just stuck it and forgot about it for 3 years. And so I don't think companies are taking that into effect right now when they do their business models and say, hey, how much is this going to cost me? They're not including the fact that they're going to have to pay for maintenance, fixing vulnerabilities, or even just general software maintenance down the road. Speaking of maintenance, so I was going to use a different picture for this, but then I saw this on Twitter just the other day. So somebody just took this in an airplane. They're still running Windows 98. 18 years ago? And pictures like this come up a lot at conferences like this, and we all kind of laugh that that's ridiculous, but I bet a lot of us in here have devices that are attached to computers which we really don't want to ever upgrade because we're worried that that device is not going to continue working. Industrial control systems are famous for this. I used to work at Berkeley National Lab, and there was a lot of computers that controlled scientific equipment that they never ever wanted to upgrade or change. Because when you have a particle accelerator that costs $1 million a day to run, you don't want to risk changing it because Windows botched another upgrade. So this is a problem, I think, and it's going to be more of a problem as software gets baked into more things and has to be updated and patched and maintained in general. So automation. In general, I would say that automation of security is a good thing, and we had a good conversation about this yesterday. And it's great when you can do over-the-air updates to automatically update security patches and things like that on your devices. But there's like an incident recently with Microsoft with Windows 10 where they forced an update onto all of the computers, and for some subset of Windows 10 computers, it caused the computer to go in this endless loop of just crashing and rebooting. So that's a kind of thing where years ago, if people did manual updates, somebody would have done that. They would have realized it was a problem. It would have become public. Microsoft would have warned people not to use that patch, and probably a lot less people would have been affected than now that Microsoft pushes automatic patches. So automation is good, but there's also risks involved in it. And Google had a similar thing that didn't actually crash anything, but when they patched the stage fright bug, the patch originally didn't fix all the security issues. So they had to go through and redo a patch and redeploy that to the 950 million Android devices, assuming that the Android devices get patches to begin with, which is an iffy proposition at best. So then in our security industry specifically, there's some processes that we need to think about as we're scaling up and putting computing and internet in billions of devices now. One of those is the CVE, the individual numbers for vulnerabilities. CVE already cannot keep up with the number of vulnerabilities that there are in software, so I think there's no way it's going to be able to keep up with all these devices that may now have vulnerabilities in them. And they recognize that, and they're not trying for 100% coverage, and there's some new alternatives to CVE that are coming out to try to address this and automate it so it'll scale better. The problem is now we don't have a single identifier for vulnerabilities. We may have 3 different vulnerabilities and different sets of vulnerabilities being covered by the different identifiers. Patch management, so this kind of goes back to the Windows 98 thing, but it's already hard to patch all of your Windows servers, patch all of your desktops, laptops, tablets, third-party software. Now you're going to have to worry about patching your elevators and your HVAC systems and your cars and your fleet and everything else. This becomes either a massive nightmare or a massive market opportunity, depending on how you look at it. And then CVSS and CIA kind of go together. So the CVSS scores that score the impact of vulnerabilities are currently mostly based on the CIA triad, so confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But that doesn't take into account other things like safety. So for example, if you've got a denial of service attack on a car, it makes a big difference to me whether that denial of service stops the car as soon as I turn it on and I can never go anywhere, versus it stops the brakes and steering from working when it's already going 70 miles an hour. But to me, those are 2 very different vulnerabilities as far as the impact of them. But they would probably get the same CVSS score. So those are a bunch of things that we're going to have to worry about in the industry specifically, whether our processes can scale to handle all these billions of new devices. So I'm going to go into some of the specific interesting challenges that I saw in specific technologies. This is the list of near-term domains that we identified. I'm not going to talk about all of them, just the ones that I think are more interesting. So I'm doing pretty good on time, so it's good. I did this talk yesterday, and it took an hour, and I only have 45 minutes today, so I'm trying to talk fast. Okay, so the connected home. Also, if the few people in here that saw my talk yesterday, I think this video will actually work this time. I can find there we go. Almost. Like playing a bad video game. So I think there's 3 things to be concerned about in connected homes. One is a privacy issue. So there's already been issues where Samsung has warned customers that if they walk in front of their smart TV and they're talking, that the TV might record their voice and send it up to Samsung when they don't realize it. There's been smart Barbie dolls where they were recording the kids' voices and sending them off in an insecure manner up to cloud services at Mattel or whatever. And so privacy issues are one of the concerns. Second concern to me is that now all of these devices that you're seeing up here that you're putting in your house become entry points into your home network. So even if your doorbell is not that important to you, if it gets compromised, the person is now inside your network and can use that to jump and pivot to your computer, your laptop, your phone, whatever. And then the third thing is the fact that these devices themselves can be attacked and whatever they're supposed to do can be overridden. So think about garage door openers or door locks or something like that. These are being put on Wi-Fi now and internet enabled. And so if a hacker can get to that, then they can just tell the door to open and then walk in and take your stuff. And I don't think people are thinking about this too much. Like my parents just bought a security system and they can check their security system and turn it on and off and stuff over the internet. And I'm like, that just seems like a really bad idea to me. You can do it, then I'm pretty sure I can do it. So augmented reality is another one that we looked at. This is interesting. It's instead of virtual reality where everything you see is fake, you wear some kind of smart goggles or glasses, like this is the Microsoft HoloLens, and you see the real world, but then you see virtual information superimposed over the real world. So in this example, this guy's supposedly designing this motorcycle, and he's seeing what the motorcycle will look like with his new pieces, even though he hasn't actually created them yet. And I think augmented reality in the beginning is probably going to be used for things like this, for engineering and architecture and medical things. But people are already talking about, hey, in 10 years we might all be walking around with smart glasses on. Hopefully they look a little better than the Google Glass. But so if you're walking around with glasses and your glasses are showing you the real world but with digital data superimposed, what's to say that the real world information you think you're seeing through those glasses is still real if they can potentially be hacked? If I'm going to step out in the street and I look for cars, I want to be really sure there's no cars coming. I'm not sure I trust a device, considering the history of security in devices, to make that assumption and step in front of or not step in front of the car, hopefully. So changing gears a little bit, cryptocurrency is another thing that came up in our report. So as of a few days ago, the market capitalization of Bitcoin, all of Bitcoin in the world, was almost $9 billion. So that's a fair chunk of money. And I think the interesting thing about Bitcoin is that you can attack the servers that store Bitcoins and wallets and keys and things like that, just like you would attack any traditional servers, but you can also attack the protocols and algorithms themselves that make up Bitcoin. Bitcoin, all it is data and protocols that are agreed upon by millions of people. And so vulnerability in that actually changes the value of the currency. So that's kind of a novel attack path. And you could argue that our current financial system is mostly just data and algorithms. It's not backed by gold or anything anymore. And there are people who can, quote unquote, hack it already. They're just financial people rather than computer people. But I think the concern is that current regulators and people that watch this kind of activity are really good at doing accounting and finance and things like that. They're probably not as good yet at doing analysis of algorithms and protocols and that kind of thing. And to be honest, Bitcoin is, I find it very confusing myself, and I'm in computers. Machine learning. So this is probably going to affect almost everybody, no matter what industry you're in. But I want to talk about how it's going to affect our industry specifically, because I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, this whole pattern where there's vulnerabilities and they get announced and patched and the patches get rolled out and eventually deployed and all that, it's going to become too fast for humans to be able to keep up with it. So we already see situations where people are trying to automate patches to apply to security issues as soon as they're found while the service is still running. And I can foresee that at some point, that whole cycle of doing the patches, finding the vulnerabilities, everything is going to become automated. So this year at DEF CON, there will be the Cyber Grand Challenge. The Grand Challenge is, it has a bunch of teams trying to design these systems that can attack each other. So they're competing in the CTF without human intervention. And then those automated systems are going to compete against the best human teams in the world at the DEF CON CTF. So, we're not quite there yet, but we're definitely on our way to the point where we as humans cannot do the current jobs that we're doing in security because it'll be just too fast. We'll have to rely on AI and machine learning to do it. So I think what our jobs will be more to define what those rules are that the AIs and the machine learning is using to figure out what it should do, which of course opens up a new attack path. Medical devices have already gotten some press with the insulin pump hacks and stuff like this. But I found this the other day on the internet. This is called the iLimb, and it's a bionic either hand or just fingers. And yes, it can be controlled from an app on your phone. You can preset different hand positions. And I'm just not sure that I'm ready to have I'd rather not have an artificial limb at all, but if I had one, I don't think that I would want to have one that's controlled by an app on a smartphone, especially Android. But really, this is kind of a superset of a lot of these other things. What we're talking about is the fact that we're now going to have all these machines that have autonomy and artificial intelligence and the ability to affect the real world and also have internet connections or just local radio connections, apps, whatever. And so do we trust these machines? Do we have confidence in them for safety engineering, but also for security engineering, that they can't be undermined or used nefariously? And I think there's going to be a strong motivation for people to attack these because a lot of these machines are going to be taking humans' jobs away, and humans often don't like that. So there's a big motivation to attack, autonomous cars because they'll take away taxi driver jobs or trucking jobs or whatever. And all of these robots already actually exist, except for the Terminator. That one doesn't exist yet. Drones is another area that we're actually researching right now, which is really interesting. We've got a couple of worries here. One is the fact that being in downtown Pittsburgh and seeing that there's hundreds of drones flying around over your head, delivering lunch or packages for Amazon or whatever, that's already kind of scary enough when you worry about whether you can attack either the drone itself or the systems that are scheduling flight paths and all that kind of thing. But then there's also this added motivation of trying to steal whatever the drones are trying to deliver. So if you can think that like terminally ill patients might think it's great to be able to have a drone deliver them morphine or something as soon as they need it from the local pharmacy, not have to wait for a driver or something. But there's a really strong motivation for an attacker to try to take control of that drone and land the morphine somewhere else so that they can get it and the intended recipient doesn't. So there's a couple different motivations than we normally see. All right, I'm actually talking too fast. I'm going to slow down. So connected and autonomous vehicles is something that I've been working on a lot for the last year or so. And kind of a big thing around Pittsburgh with the Uber Advanced Technology Center and everything. Do we have anybody that's willing to admit that they work at Uber ATC in here today? No. So either they're not here or they're not willing to admit it. So this is kind of a combination of 3 different domains that we recognized, and I figured I'd put them together and we'll go into a little bit more technical depth since this is what I've been doing recently. So this is networked telematics. This means the in-vehicle infotainment system, basically the little thing in the center console of your car, which now has maps and navigation, and also can say like what miles per gallon you're getting and all kinds of information about your car. Obviously still has entertainment, radio, and all that. And then autonomous vehicles are vehicles that can self-drive to some degree, whether that's just the current Tesla can take control or go park itself, and going the whole way up to fully autonomous cars that don't need a human driver at all. And then intelligent transportation systems are coming up, and this is sometimes called V2X. And what that is cars and road infrastructure communicating with each other through short-range radio messages. So a stop sign can actually send a message to your car saying, hey, there's a stop sign coming up. Your car can be saying, hey, I'm at this location, I'm going this fast, and broadcast that to all the other cars around with the idea that your car can make decisions based on those. So they'll be too fast for you to make a decision, but your car might be able to adjust itself. So network telematics is the area that I've been looking at the most recently. We just put out a report a couple months ago that where we looked at devices that plug into your car. They're called OBD2 devices, and this on the right-hand side is an example of one of these. And we examined a whole bunch of these because the concern is that they plug into your car and this therefore give you network access to the network that's in the car, and they also have a radio on them, which allows access from a smartphone over Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or over a cellular connection. And so we examined a bunch of these and found that pretty much all of them had some security problems. There were ones that we got off of Amazon for $10, and they really were just like a serial connection from Bluetooth to the inside of your car. And I'll talk in a little bit more depth about those in a minute. And self-driving cars, I think everybody kind of knows what those are. This is the self-driving car that CMU built a couple years ago, right down the street. It's actually parked at the National Robotics Engineering Center, whose name I always flub. But the interesting thing about this self-driving car is it's not obvious from the outside that it can drive itself. All of the cameras and radar and LiDAR and stuff are built in. Although I've been in it, and if you open the back, the whole trunk is basically taken up by racks of 1U servers running Linux. So it's not quite as practical as a real car yet. But we know that the Uber cars are already driving around Pittsburgh, so this is definitely something that's coming up quickly. And then I mentioned V2X, and this is kind of a visual depiction from the Department of Transportation of how this might work, but it involves both vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure services, which are called V2V and V2I. And you can kind of see from the picture that what it's showing is that both the vehicles themselves and the infrastructure along the roads can broadcast information. So this ambulance could be broadcasting, hey, I'm an ambulance, you should get out of the way, and your car could automatically change lanes to clear the way. Construction equipment could be broadcasting, there's a lane closed up ahead, you should move to the left. A car could broadcast messages back behind it saying that they're slowing down suddenly for some reason, so all the other cars behind it would know, hey, there's something going on because a car up there slowed down all of a sudden. That's kind of the idea behind this glorious vision. So we're going to dive into just a little bit of technical stuff. I promise not too much hexadecimal first thing in the morning, but just to explain a little bit about how cars work on the insides, they basically have a whole bunch of things called electronic control units, ECUs, that communicate over various types of networking, but one of the most common networks they use internally is called the CAN bus, or controller area network. And the thing about cars is that there's no central server or brain inside the car that knows what all these different ECUs do. Each one of them operates on its own, and all it knows is, if I receive certain inputs, I should do certain things. And so there's nothing that's looking for patterns of activity that might be suspicious or something that the car wouldn't normally do. So somebody asked me yesterday, like, so if a car says that it's going 90,000 miles an hour, is the car going to be smart enough to realize that its odometer cannot probably also be at 70,000 miles after an hour of doing that? And the answer is no. There's nothing that correlates those different pieces of data to realize that that's a problem. So the CAN bus specifically is a problem. Basically, there is no security built into the car because they never expected the internal network of a car to be attached to the internet, which it now is. So just briefly to explain why this is a problem, the CAN bus is a simple serial protocol. Most of these devices that plug into your car, or they're already built into the car like your infotainment system, they just use this simple AT command set, the same thing that we used in our Hayes modems back in like the 90s, to send serial commands to the CAN bus. And the format of a CAN bus message is extremely simple. There's a CAN identifier which says which ECU that message is intended for, and then there's a length and the data, up to 8 bytes of data that can go in it. You'll note that there's no source identifier, so that's a problem. If my speedometer gets a message and it's addressed to it and it says the current wheel speed is 70 miles an hour, it has no idea whether that actually came from a wheel speed sensor on the wheel or if it came from the CAN bus because I just injected it. It has no idea where it came from, so it's just going to act on it without that kind of authentication. And this would be totally unacceptable in a network protocol that we put in our enterprise IT networks, but this is how cars and lots of other machinery have operated for decades. And then down at the bottom, here's just a couple of examples of CAN messages so you can see what they look like. You can see they've got an identifier, and then 8 is the length, and then they've got a few bytes explaining what they're doing. One is just requesting a list of all diagnostic trouble codes from the car, and another is, I've been working on a Chevy Volt that we have up at CMU, which is currently inoperable. Oops. And but that you can request the current amps of the battery, meaning the big 300-volt battery that runs it, because it's an electric car. So those are just some examples to show you how simple the protocol is. A couple other examples. So I sent these commands over one of the devices I had compromised. I sent these commands into the car and got back like the current engine RPM and the outside ambient air temperature. And so all I had to do was send messages to specific CAN IDs. And once you know the messages, it'll reply with whatever the current information is. So that's just reading information, and not terrible, although it's kind of bad that I can do it over the internet. But even better is this one that I found for the Volt. This is a CAN ID for the door lock control system, and so you can send these messages that you see on the side, and you can cause the front door to unlock, or all of the doors to lock, or all the doors to unlock. You can set off the panic button or disable the panic button if it's going off and you're trying to steal the car. So at this point I was like, sweet, I got to the point where I can steal my own car. I haven't actually gotten the car to start yet by doing this because I have to spoof the little remote key thing, the key fob. So I can get it to start in accessory mode, but all that does is turn on the radio and the air conditioning and things. So not quite to the point where I can totally steal the car just using this compromised device, but I'm getting there. By next year I should have actually moved the car. So changing gears a little, we're going to talk about the PKI system that's used for this vehicle-to-vehicle. So you can imagine that it's a concern if you've got all these cars and all these infrastructure elements on the road that are sending messages to each other and taking actions based on those messages. If you can spoof those messages, you can cause accidents, you can cause traffic jams, whatever. And so this is a public picture of what the Department of Transportation is recommending for their test of this kind of system that they're conducting in Detroit and a couple other cities. And they have built this incredibly complicated looking PKI system, which is in fact incredibly complicated. And this is going to be the largest PKI system ever built, 250 million cars with over 1 trillion public key certificates in it. And they've done a pretty good job of this. I've actually skimmed through what I could understand of the 100-page document on it. And it seems like it's pretty good. They've got some real crypto experts and stuff. And it's got some good things built in. So it's got a misbehavior authority built right into it. So your car is driving along, it will get certificate revocation lists on a regular basis, so you know that if for some reason my car is misbehaving and I'm no longer allowed to send messages to other cars, that certificate will be revoked. I'll get it on the next certificate. Other cars will get the certificate revocation list, and they'll no longer trust my messages. It also has a couple things for privacy, because people the Department of Transportation they figured that the average citizen would be concerned about the privacy of having all this information about their car being broadcast to everybody all the time. So there's a location obscurer proxy, which does exactly what it says. It blocks the location of the car from being able to be figured out based on the network traffic. So you can essentially do a trace route to somebody's car. And then there's up here, the pseudonym CA. So it turns out, and I didn't know this, that you can create public key certificates and public key, private key pairs where many different private keys can sign for the same public key. And so that enables all these different cars to sign using their own individual key, but to the system it just looks like one public key that may represent any of thousands of cars. So that helps obfuscate which car is broadcasting which signals where. Because otherwise you can imagine it would be really easy to trace a car as it moves between these different points in a city, just based on the messages received by stoplights or something. So this is actually really good. I think they did a good job designing this, and they took a lot of things into consideration, but it's a really massive, complex system. And do we know of any massive, complex systems that don't have vulnerabilities in them? Do we know of any simple systems that don't have vulnerabilities in them? Probably not. So it's a little bit concerning, but they're really working on it, so it's a good sign. This is just an example of how those messages, like how far they'll go. So this is a Google Maps with a little red circle that shows about the range, and the little black dot in the middle is a car right there. So you're talking about a range of like 200 meters, so it's not, the attack surface of the radios themselves, the range isn't very far. The concern is more attacking the certificate authority system itself, because that's, as attackers, that's usually what we do, right? We don't attack the end nodes, we try to attack the systems that run all of the credentials if we can. We'd much rather have a domain admin than have just a user's workstation. Now, a couple good things about this. I know everything I've been saying this morning has been bad and made you have bad dreams tonight, but there are a couple good things. This proposed system is only pushing out what are called basic safety messages. They're just real short things like, hey, I'm slowing down all of a sudden. It's nothing real complicated. And these messages are only one way, so there's no kind of request-response sort of thing. Just, I'm broadcasting my information about my car, you can use it or not as you see fit. You don't want to trust me, that's fine. It requires internet connectivity, which is both a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that you can push down the certificate revocation lists in real time. So, as soon as a car or a stop sign or whatever starts misbehaving and sending spoof traffic or bad messages, I can get a thing revoking their certificate. The bad thing is that requires internet connectivity, obviously, to get that pushed to you. There's currently no peer-to-peer way to do it over the radios. So as soon as you lose internet connectivity in your car, like if you're driving through a spot where there's no cell phone receptivity, your car stops actually trusting any certificates until it can reconnect to the internet and get the new CRL. So I can see that as a possible, a denial of service or something problem there. And then currently, you must be enrolled at a dealer. This is obviously not being installed in real cars quite yet, but their plan at the moment is that you would have to take your car to the dealer, and there's a fairly long process of authorizing your car and saying, yes, this really belongs to this person and all that kind of thing, and downloading all of the certificates. So it's a pretty high overhead. They're looking to possibly change that so it's a little easier. All right, a couple of cool things to wrap up here. So this is a LiDAR scene, like radar, except it uses lasers. And this is one of the main things that autonomous cars use to figure out their environment. This is actually Market Street in San Francisco, as seen by a LiDAR system. And these actually create a pretty accurate picture. There's a lot of details. You can see the rails going up the street for the streetcars and stuff like that. The problem is it's not that difficult to attack these systems directly rather than attacking the network components. So if you just take a regular laser and shine it at the LiDAR system on the car, you see that. Basically nothing. Now granted, most of the cars have multiple LiDAR systems on them, so just because you can blind one, assuming you can hit the camera with a laser, doesn't mean you're going to blind all of them, but if you have an autonomous car driving through the middle of downtown San Francisco, I'm concerned if even one of my cameras is not working correctly. And I know Google and Uber and stuff are working on this, but the fact is there are already known attacks on these autonomous systems. So getting back to the semantic attacks that I mentioned earlier on, this is kind of interesting. So pop quiz, what's this a picture of? A car, yes, a red car. It's really obvious that this is a red car because it's bright red and it's very car-shaped and it stands out from the background really good. So a visual recognition system that, like a camera that actually uses visible light waves, just like we would see, would be able to figure out that that's a car based on machine learning. It looks like all the other cars it's ever seen. This car does not. So obviously camouflage is intended to trick our visual systems and make us not be able to recognize things. And so this vehicle has all these blotches of weirdly shaped color, and the colors kind of blend into the background and the foreground. So our current visual recognition systems would have a very hard time figuring out that that was a car. So if this ancient World War II truck was driving from this building towards an autonomous vehicle, the vehicle might not even realize it was there. So that's a problem if it can't see other cars, but it's also potentially a problem with pedestrians. So it's going to be really hard for current visual recognition systems on cameras to figure out that those are pedestrians. Again, because their outlines are broken up, they're weird colors, they blend into the background, etc. And so this is, again, a semantic attack. If you dressed like this and stood in front of an autonomous car, which I'm not sure why you would want to attack in that way, but assuming you did, what you're doing is you're providing valid information. You're not doing a buffer overflow or anything like that. The camera is accurately recording the colors it sees, the shapes it sees, etc. It's just that when it feeds it into its machine learning inside the car, you're going to override its algorithms for what it thinks a pedestrian looks like. I think it's interesting that you can, potentially trick these things not using traditional software flaws that we're used to using. Admittedly, if you did this one, you'd be a suicidal attacker and you wouldn't hack anything else, but I'm sure there's some way to abuse that. And these are not just hypothetical. So I just met last week a guy named Dr. Jonathan Petit from Security Innovation, who actually did some of these tests, including the LiDAR thing and the breaking up cars with blocks of color thing to trick cameras, and has found that these are actual problems in current systems that they're using. And he has a bunch of other experiments that he wants to do on other things. But so the point is that there are active attacks against these systems, even as these systems haven't been deployed yet. Yes?
So if it's so easy to do this, and we can prove that we can do it, how come it's not being done? There's obviously a financial motivation. How come cars aren't driving themselves off the street?
So that's a good point. Hang on one second, I'll just... Okay, yeah, let me talk about that for a second. So the question, if you couldn't hear him, was why are we not hearing about attackers hacking cars and driving people off the street and things like that? For one, I'm not sure that there's a motivation necessarily to just drive cars off the street for a lot of hackers. Certainly there's a subset where there is that motivation. But I think the biggest thing is the fact that it's actually really difficult to reverse engineer a car currently. So if I want to write an exploit for Windows or Linux, pretty easy. I have a good idea of, once I've got the vulnerability, I've got an idea of how to do the shell code to create an exploit. On cars, how to affect steering wheels and brakes and things like that, it varies definitely from manufacturer to manufacturer and even between models and even model years. So in order to write an exploit that works, it's only going to work on a very small subset of cars. So unless you have a known person that has a car that and you know the exact year and everything, and you really don't like that person, it's still hard to do that. But I think what we're going to see is people are already reverse engineering these cars, which is why I have some of the CAN IDs and things from the Chevy Volt. And we're going to see people putting together exploit kits and putting them out on the internet saying, hey, this is all the information for how to control a Jeep Cherokee or a Chevy Volt or whatever. Does that answer the question? All right, so bringing this all together, I actually made one of my own pictures. You can probably tell it's not as good as the other pictures. But what we're going to have is we're going to have this car that's driving around and it's going to be talking to the internet all the time, getting its certificate revocation lists. It's going to be getting updates to its maps because self-driving cars are heavily dependent on maps, much more so even than GPS. But it is also going to be getting things from space, like satellite radio and GPS signals. And you might think satellite radio, well, that's not a big deal. Like, so somebody hacks it and they force my Sirius XM to play Taylor Swift all the time. Like, that's, pretty annoying, but not the worst thing that could happen. I don't know, maybe some of you think that is the worst thing that could happen. But the problem is that satellite radio is used in place of cellular, especially on like long distance trucks and heavy equipment, construction equipment and things like that, because or in addition to cellular, because they know that they might be in a lot of areas, or they will be in areas where there's no cell receptivity. So it's not just radio going over those radios, not just music. It's also, this other information that might come from the internet might come from a satellite. So we've seen vulnerabilities already in satellite systems that CERT has published on. So this is definitely being exploited for real. The little blue cone that's sticking out the front of the car, that's your automated driver assist system. So the radar and the LiDAR, we talked about the fact that all of those can be spoofed in some way. Ultrasonic is interesting. Ultrasonic, actually, you can spoof messages without even having any original message go out to the car. And then you've got all these things that are talking to your car, sending messages that it should trust. The V2I and the V2V stuff that I was talking about. So the bottom middle picture is kind of interesting. That's trucks doing what's called platooning. This is something where these big heavy trucks take advantage of these messages to drive up really close behind one another to take advantage of drafting to get better gas mileage and stuff. And they can do this because the radios in them are talking to each other. And so if the first one slows down, the automatic brakes in the other ones behind it can also slow them down far faster than a human could do it, which is great as long as the system has no security issues. Now, somebody brought up, well, would a car or another truck actually try to hack the system in order to get a place in line? I don't know. Would the machine learning system decide that that's a good thing to do? So there's potentially issues there, and then the bottom right, I just had to put a Ferrari in.
Is that yours?
Yeah, that's mine. Come on, you know where I work. No comment. All right, so this is the actual report. If you want all of the details, this includes things like expected market share and expected amounts of revenue in the industry and stuff, so you can go download it from that URL. And I'm going to take questions until they kick me off the stage. Someone back here?
Yeah. I have a question. Any reference designs to more secure CAN bus? I mean, like a star or some firewall on your wireless, your RF, your interfaces?
So two answers to that, I guess. So on the one hand, we've already put out some best practices for devices that plug into your car, and I think that those are going to get formalized, and we're working with the SAE on a more secure OBD2 port, which is the port that a lot of these plug into in your car. And then inside the car, there are a lot of people that are doing research into adding things like firewalls, network segmentation, doing encryption and authentication using crypto. The difficulty there is that a lot of these ECUs are running on 8-bit or even 4-bit processors, so they really can't do AES encryption and things like that. So there's also an SAE standard on cybersecurity in cars that is, I think, in draft right now and should be coming out soon. So the good thing is that manufacturers are aware of this, and we're working with a lot of them to try to fix some of these problems, but it's not there yet. And the cars they're putting the security fixes in now aren't going to be on the road for 5 years. And I've read estimates that by 2020, we're going to see about like 20 million cars, self-driving cars, fully autonomous on the roads in the US. So it's a question of whether the cars or the security will get here first. Adam?
Hey, I was going to say, with the V2X, do you think that there's any applicable uses that law enforcement will be using that to slow people down, to pull them over, to lock them out of vehicles if it's stolen, etc.?
The question is, with the V2X technologies, will law enforcement use that for things? I'm sure that they're going to want to. That's one of the main reasons why DOT designed these location obscure proxies and the I couldn't say this word yesterday either, the pseudonym certificate authority to prevent that information from being collected. Whether they'll be successful in staving off people that want that, I don't know. But I think certainly as far as like speed control and stuff, yes. I wouldn't be surprised if it's essentially impossible to speed in 10 years. On the flip side, they'll probably raise the speed limits because the autonomous systems can adapt a lot faster. It's kind of dark in here, so if you're in the back and you have your hand up, okay, George.
So my earlier question, isn't there already a tap on cars and it's called a brick?
So that's something that comes up a lot, yeah.
To my point, is there a motivation for you and a lot of researchers and to get VHS money in B2B to kind of scare us and say, hey, this is a big threat? Like when somebody asks you that, what do you say?
I say yes, there are known kinetic attacks against cars, which are much easier to do than me reverse engineering the unlock codes for the Chevy Volt. The difference, one, is the fact that you can probably do it less traceably. So a brick through window causes a pretty big, obvious thing. And the other thing is that you can potentially do this at scale. So even the ones that have only short-range radio connections, like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, are connecting to phones or IVI systems or something that are connecting to the internet. So, like Chris and Charlie found that the vulnerability they found in the Jeeps, there was like 700,000 cars on the internet with those. Because Chris and Charlie didn't release the details of how the Jeep's control systems worked.
Do you remember when the Bluetooth 1 came out and it was the first way to really listen to Bluetooth, because Bluetooth
Yep.
devices that have a risk mode, and suddenly there was an increased
right?
Suddenly you were seeing sales in that area. We're at the very beginning of this. I mean, there's just not, it's not like you can download an SDK to do analysis, right?
Right. Well, you can get software kits for specific models of cars, but it's right. It's per car.
Like a bus fire from dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't just buy a bus pilot or download Metasploit or something like that. So believe me, I hope that I'm wrong about this, and we find that there are not security problems.
Do you feel confident, Dan, that we're going to tackle this problem so that I don't get arrested by my car and taken across country without my against my will?
Yeah, I think I do. Like I said, I've been talking to a lot of manufacturers and standards organizations and Department of Transportation, and people really do care about this, largely because of the Jeep hack, love it or hate it. And so I think that people are taking this seriously, and we're going to get a handle on it to the degree that we have a handle on car security already. So it's going to be better than what we have now, which is humans driving cars and killing 30,000 people a year in the U.S. Will there be security issues? Will there even potentially be hacks? Will people possibly die? Probably. And I mean, we kind of know from car security in general, or car safety in general, that it takes a bunch of people dying before manufacturers are actually willing to go to the cost of a recall and fix problems a lot of times. So that's a concern. But yeah, I mean, there's a question of what the impact or risk of this is compared to traditional attacks. Yes?
Yeah, with the AI architecture, you talked a bit about how they have some automated mechanisms for defending against bad actors. Is there anything built into the standard that defends against replay attacks? You can't just do a denial of service on you get traffic by replaying, copious amounts?
Yeah, it does. Similar to SSL, it uses nonces and stuff that are agreed upon, and it does the same kind of thing where it uses the public keys to establish an encrypted connection with keys that are unique to that session. So it's got similar functions. I mean, my question is more, are the radios themselves secure from attacking outside of that encrypted channel at all? But I don't know yet. Other questions? I don't think I see any hands, so if that's it, thank you very much.
So I'd like to thank Dan as the presenter's gift. I'd also like to thank Dan for his presentation, and further, Dan's been part of Pittsburgh B-Side since the beginning in 2011 as either an organizer, a presenter, or both, and over the past few years, although he stepped down from the organizer role, while he's continued to support us through submitting CMPs and speaking, when chosen, so thanks. This year we have decided to give out one very special badge, a black and gold forever badge, to Dan, to thank him for all his contributions to the information security community. Give me your camera. This badge is a custom design from people Brian Gray. So I'd like to thank you, and this badge will get you in all future B-Sides Pittsburgh events, even if we're sold out.
So I really appreciate that, guys.
So please thank me, or help me thank you. So with that, I'd also wanted to thank our sponsors again, and at this time, our premier sponsor is TrustedSec. Platinum is Splunk, Security Risk Advisors, Palo Alto, Plus Consulting, Foresight, and CERT. So another round of applause for our some of our top sponsors. So we'll continue to shout out to the other sponsors throughout the day. Now, logistically, we have a break, and in about a half hour or so, we'll start up again. Thanks.